Probably with the perspective of NWA and WCW having the original Four Horsemen, which were all the guys that you just mentioned. Dude, they were an extraordinary league of some gentlemen. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Whenever you saw Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen, you could always imagine that they were going to be strutting around thinking they was bad stuff.
And they were, man.
And they
literally were. That was the beauty. That was the beauty about the Horsemen. I mean, they could talk crap. They can look good doing it, and they backed it up. Every time they were out there backing up. There's one image of World Championship Wrestling, the old program of Jim Crockett Promotion, came on every Saturday morning that you always see when the Four Horsemen were out, and it was when they were out as a collective whole. You will see these people in the stands, in the studio stands in WTBS, put their suits on trying to emulate the Horsemen. When did you ever have a heel faction, and a heel in which people in the audience back in those days, in the mid-'80s and even before that, was dressing up like the heel? You never saw that. You never saw people do that as the bad guy. The Horsemen were just on a whole different level. They were cool. They were cocky. They had the money. They had the chicks. They had the titles. They had the trophies. And they backed it up every time.
See, and that's what made them so special. I mean, they were a total package deal because of all the stuff that you named off that they had. I mean, you know, they had every right to be the way they were. And they had everything that most superstar athletes in wrestling could only dream of having. And that's pretty well summed up. And I'll tell you right now, man, there will never be another Four Horsemen.
Oh, definitely. I don't think so either. And even when you had Luger join the group, they were cool. I mean,
you know, so bad.
He wasn't the best of Horsemen, but he still was a cocky, arrogant prick. And he was a pretty good wrestler. And many people, you know, liked it. And many people hated it. But you had to respect it because every time they came out, no matter what faction they had in the 80s, in my opinion, the one with Barry Windham was pretty damn cool.
Oh, yeah.
When Barry Windham joined in 1988, that was just on a whole different level. That's when they were really complete in all of the phases. But
I agree.
You know, the Horsemen were every faction that you saw after that, heel or face or whatever, they modeled a lot after the Horsemen. The Horsemen are just revolutionary.
Without a doubt.
You know, also in the NWA, you got to talk about guys like Dusty Rhodes and Magnum TA, who were just
American Dream, just
fantastic. Dusty Rhodes during the 1980s captured the World's Heavyweight Championship, I believe, on 2 occasions, and on another occasion, and I believe in 1979 when he won against Harley Race. But he was just a fantastic character. Him and Ric Flair in 1985 put on one of the best feuds of all time, best angles, with Dusty feuding against Flair for the world's title towards Starrcade 85. And then Dusty, we thought he won the title, and then he gets screwed out of it by Tommy Young, who says that he didn't see it, and that Dusty had pinned Flair, and plus only Arn Anderson came in, and it was a disqualification and all this other nonsense. And then in 1986, the feud it continues to transcend into 1986, and then you have Dusty Rhodes winning the world's title at the Great American Bash in 1986, but he only has it for a short period until he loses it again to Ric Flair, and then Ric Flair had that huge run. So, you know, I mean, Dusty Rhodes is one of the best of all time.
Well, I tell you, when you talk about Ric Flair, Brandon, I mean, how many times did he win the heavyweight title? Like 14, 15,
he's a 16-time world champ.
I mean, I remember, like, he was out of the loop for a while, and in 1998 or 99, when the Bala Center got built in Greenville, South Carolina, that was at one of the WCW Monday Nitro events that were really popular then. Ric Flair made his big return.
In 98, yeah.
To wrestling. And that was probably a very exciting moment. And I mean, I've seen Ric Flair fight numerous times. Have seen him fight in person. Going to see wrestling, he fought Lex Luger. That was a great match. Unfortunately, I can't remember who won. I was a kid.
Well, most likely it was either Lex Luger by DQ or Flair won by cheating.
More than likely. But yeah, I mean, you talk about all these other guys. I tell you, like a tag team that I feel that was legendary in WWE, and another wrestler, I don't know if he was from NWA or WCW, but for the tag team to start off with, I love Demolition.
Oh, yeah.
Smashing Axe. They were like Kiss, man, the famous rock band. I mean, they painted their face up. They were really just cool and badass. They had on like the studs and the leather and stuff like Judas Priest.
Well, you know, they were like an extension of the Road Warriors.
Yeah.
It was just another great tag team in the 80s. And yeah, as you brought up the subject of tag teams were just prevalent in the 80s too. You had the Rock and Roll Express.
Yep.
You had the Midnight Express with Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette, one of my favorite people in wrestling, period. And, you know, there was just a plethora of great tag teams. And then you had the territorial system in wrestling during the 1980s, where you had wrestling across every sector of the United States.
Oh, yeah.
And you could just go there during a Saturday and pay attention to the, you know, Saturday night or Wednesday night or Sunday night or whatever night the wrestling is shown, and you can watch a TV taping as well. It just wasn't the WWE or Jim Crockett Promotions. It was it was the entire territorial system of the NWA that was in place. And then you had the American Wrestling Association in Minnesota that not a lot of us down here in the South were able to see, but it was very prevalent in a lot of the wrestling magazines that we could actually go and look at. So there was a lot of cool stuff in the 1980s. And, you know, speaking of a lot of cool things in the 80s, another thing that I liked personally was the advent of pay-per-view television. Yeah. Because through pay-per-view, we were able to see these supercards. And back in the 80s, early 80s, without pay-per-view being prevalent, one of the biggest things is, you know, you had to go to see a supercard, and that's when you had the Starcades come into play.
Oh yeah.
That people wanted to go see at the arena because they didn't have that pay-per-view outlet to see it. Now, that's also where you have to bring out closed circuit television.
Yeah.
When that's what the closed circuit arenas where you could actually go to an arena and watch a broadcast of one of these big shows live, and you pay money for it, and you go see it at huge gates back then. Because pay-per-view, as I said, wasn't prevalent. But when pay-per-view hit, that was a huge phenomenon. WWE capitalized on it with Wrestling Classic from '85. That kind of started it. And then you have to talk about WrestleMania 2, WrestleMania 3 going in. And then with Jim Crockett Promotions, they started to get deep into it with Starrcade '87. And, you know, you know me, I have a lot of mixed opinions about that. I think that's really what hurt the NWA, but that's for another video. But what I'm trying to say is that pay-per-view played such a vital role in the way we saw big cards and big supercards in the 80s. We might have never really heard that much about WrestleManias if it wasn't for pay-per-view.
Oh, I agree.
We may have not heard that much about Starrcades if it wasn't for pay-per-view. So what are some of your thoughts about pay-per-view and how it like really shaped wrestling?
Well, the pay-per-views really beefed up all the great matches that you would want to see, man. Especially like going back yet again to Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, or Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior. I mean, when those things were beefed up and hyped, people were going to pay the money to see it. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, you got your money's worth.
Oh, definitely. Something like that.
You got what you wanted. And one other wrestler that I was going to mention to you that I never hear about anymore, and he always fought Sting and Ric Flair. He was really good. The Great Muta.
Oh, man. Gosh. Thank you for reminding me. A lot of Muta marks here on YouTube and the internet wrestling community, and I'm one of them, and obviously Stevie is too. I remember when Muta debuted in WCW/NWA 1989. It was him and the late Gary Hart came in.
Oh, yeah?
Came into play.
Okay.
Yeah, Gary Hart managed him at first. And it was kind of a knockoff of the Kabuki character that you saw in World Class Championship Wrestling in various other territories during the 1980s. But Muta was something different. And we never saw anybody, with the agility that he had. With just the mystery behind his gimmick.
Yeah.
And he's the one who really started the moonsault. I don't care what anyone else says. I don't care what anyone else may claim. The moonsault became popular because of the Great Muta.
I agree.
I mean, that's where everybody, I remember when we were used to play little tag wrestling and stuff when I was a kid, tried to do that damn moonsault. Oh, yeah. Nobody could do it.
Not me.
I mean, man, the dude, I don't think he said one word in WCW when he was there.
He's a very quiet person.
But he didn't need to. I mean, his actions spoke louder than words. And he's one of the great NWA World Television Champions. I remember his feud with Sting back in '89. He had a
big feud with Sting, and he had one with Ric Flair at one point too.
Yes, exactly. He did with Terry Funk involved when they were all part of the contingency with Gary Hart. But I mean, all of this just great wrestling of the 1980s just goes to show me that may have been the decade for entertainment I've ever seen.
Oh God, without a doubt. I mean, not saying wrestling's bad today. It's not. It's still very entertaining. I unfortunately stopped keeping up with it after Stone Cold and The Rock left WWE, because those at that point in my life were two of my favorite wrestlers, and they were two of the biggest stars in the WWE circuit. I mean, but however, it just seemed like wrestling was just more realistic. They had better storylines, and it just seemed to appeal so much to a lot of people. It still appeals to a lot of people today, but there was just something about the 1980s era of it that was just, I don't know. It just can't really describe it.
It was, wrestling back then was simplistic. It wasn't filled with the crap that you see today with WWE Raw and the WWE altogether, and TNA and all those the organizations.
Yeah, TNA is, that's just a branch off
of WCW when they were in the 90s. That's exactly what it is.
Sting's wrestling there. Scott Steiner, a.k.a. Big Papa.
And he's like off and on in TNA. They'll decide to fire him and then bring him back, and he'll probably be fired and bring back again. But, right now they've got Hulk Hogan there. They've got Eric Bischoff there. They've got all of these older WCW wrestlers, the band, aka Wolfpack, with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. And I just heard that they won the tag titles. And then none of it really, TNA has a lot of issues, and I will be discussing them in some edition of the Secluded Paradyme, because I think there needs to be a very thorough discussion about TNA, because it's just not the creative that's wrong with it. It's the entire organizational model of TNA. And as for the WWE, they like to call themselves sports entertainment. They've been doing that since the 80s, but at least in the 80s they were at least bringing us pro wrestling. Now they got guest hosts and stuff, and just horrible creative programming. You got Stephanie McMahon, who's the head of creative, who really doesn't know what she's doing. When they want to build up this big publicity company that's filled with Hollywood entertainment. And as a wrestling fan, and I don't know about you, Stevie, I'm pretty sure you don't want to see that crap.
No, I do not.
That's why most casual fans, and Stevie now is mostly a casual fan because he doesn't watch as regularly as I do. But back in the day, we were diehard wrestling fans, and we couldn't miss 1 minute of it. Yeah. And now I'm like saying to myself, is it really even worth watching the crap that we see in WWE these days?
I mean, the storylines are still good. I mean, you got people like John Cena who are really big. You got Chris Jericho. Who is the really big, beefed up guy with the buzz haircut and all the tattoos that's so popular now?
Oh, Batista. But see, Batista now is the bad guy now.
Yeah. I mean, even though he's a bad guy,
and it's awesome though. It's awesome. Batista. Be fair to Batista, he is awesome now.
Yeah.
The spotlight and all that stuff. I mean, you're doing good with guys like him. Randy Orton is kicking tail. You even have him as like a hybrid of Stone Cold's character. They've got CM Punk, who's really doing a good job. They've got pieces. TNA has pieces too, but it's just the way they present the product isn't nearly as entertaining.
It's not marketable.
It's not. It just doesn't have the same flair as it did in the 1980s and even the early 90s.
When wrestling, it was still hot.
Yeah. When wrestling was just, it made a lot of sense. It was simplistic. Yeah. It was a classic good guy versus bad guy, and you just want to see how the morality play is going to shape out, instead of knowing how the morality play is going to shape out or just not giving a damn. But I'm going to end this entire video with just asking you, and I'm going to give my perspective too, on our favorite single wrestler and our favorite tag team wrestler of the 1980s.
Okay, single favorite wrestler for me, Brandon, I would have to, can I say it's a tie?
All right, go ahead.
I mean, I got to, man. It's between Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. But, I mean, you can't, with them two, it's kind of like, man, so parallel in very many ways. This is a little right here. They're right here, and I like, single wrestlers, it's them two for sure. Boom. Tag team, that was a good question because there's been a lot of good tag teams over the years. But if I'm going to go with something classic, let's go with something classic. The Steiner Brothers.
Wow, yes, the Steiner Brothers. Many of you know the Steiner Brothers came into play in 1989. Mm-hmm. Rick Steiner was a part of the Varsity Club. He eventually was a part of the first family with the late, great Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, and they became the United States Tag Team Champions with Missy Hyatt And then fast forward a little bit later, then you had his brother, Scott Steiner, come into play, and Rick and Scott became one of the best tag teams of all time. Won their first World Tag Team Championship in late 1989. You know, great